I'm not even gonna like be modest about it. It's amazing and I love it.
How can each of us be a part of this find a way for everyone to have this, for everyone to have a shared and
Hello and welcome to another episode of Yarn to Table. I'm Celeste and this is a show about my knitting life. I haven't recorded in a while because I gave birth to my daughter Cosette about 4 months ago, and I have been taking some time to deal with the chaos of new motherhood. So here I am. I have so much to show you that I've done since then, and I want to kind of like get through all of it, but not in depth, because I want to keep this episode length reasonable, for one thing, just because I'm not even sure I'm going to be able to upload this because Wi-Fi has been so slow for everyone during the COVID pandemic. And speaking of which, I just want to say, wherever you are in the world, I hope that you are doing your part to flatten the curve, and I hope that you and your loved ones are safe and well. So, since I'm going to be going through everything relatively quickly to get through it all, I want to say, as always, the details on all of my projects are on my Ravelry page. You can find me there and on Instagram as Celeste Full, and that's linked down below. And so if you want to know the pattern, the yarn, that's all there. So on a lot of these, I'm either not going to remember the name of the pattern because there's just too many things and it's been too long. And frankly, I just think it's more interesting to talk about the details of my experience versus spending a lot of time just telling you the credits of the colorways of everything and blah, blah, blah. So that's all on Ravelry, and let's jump into it before we waste any more time with this. So the last thing that I was working on before I went into labor was the beginning of an urban jungle hat, which I was very into knitting. It's a stranded colorwork leopard print beanie that's done with a strand of, I think, DK weight, yeah, and a strand of the lace weight mohair. And as you can see, this is a disgusting sort of vomit color, which is why I stopped. I got into my head, you know, I was about to go into labor and I really wanted to make this hat, and I was like, I have to make it right now. And the only mohair that I could get really quickly was from Amazon, and the color that it looked like in the photo looked like it was going to go with this background color, but it ended up being a lot more gray, and so together they just make a really, really gross color. So I was trying to make it work for a little while. I knit the whole brim, and it just is really yucky, so I stopped. And I saved it so that I could show you, because, you know, at that point I didn't realize I was going to have plenty of content to get through the next time we talked. So there's that. And then the next thing I want to show you is the finished object that I had been working on that you saw before, so I won't talk in detail. If you want to hear details about my process with these beautiful underwing mitts, I talk about them in the episode just previous to this, where I had not quite finished them, or maybe I had done one and not the second, something like that. They are absolutely magnificent. They're now done and blocked, and I'm going to have to make a second pair for my mother at some point. They're probably a more colorful pair for her. So yeah, I love this pattern, and I talk really in depth about my experience with it in the episode previous to this one. So you can check that out if you're interested, but that's the update on these. After finishing these, the next thing that I made, and this was truly the last thing I finished before giving birth, was another pair of mitts, which are called the Beeswax Mitts. And They are a beautiful, beautiful textured hexagon pattern. And it's interesting because I'm not a big mitts person. Like, I don't think I had knit a pair of mitts in a really long time. Like a really long time. And then I knit these two pair back to back. I was just feeling it. But this pattern is one I've been wanting to knit for a while because I love the texture. And I have to say, this is such a beautifully designed pattern because what she actually does is she creates this little thumb gusset here without interrupting the texture. And so it actually pushes out of the geometry to give you some space here, and there's no like harsh line where the texture stops at any point. It just continues perfectly, but while giving you that shape that you want. Really beautifully written, and definitely took some extra work on the designer's part to make it that perfect. So it's the kind of thing that I really, really appreciate when I pay for a pattern. You know, I want it to be something, a lot of times I'd like it to be something more than, you know, just like throwing a texture on something else. I mean, there's a time and place for that, of course, and there's nothing wrong with that, really. I just, I have so much respect for seeing someone put in extra effort to making something that's just really special like this. So I love these. They are not as warm as the fingerling, as the underwing mitts, even though they are a thicker yarn because it's a superwash, and of course the underwings are double thick because they're stranded. But a really, really cute look. And this is made out of this leftover ball of Madeline Tosh that I used in my Tecumseh, and I have been using it. You'll see it in more projects here. I just keep using the leftovers, and no matter what I do, I still have yarn left, and I still have yarn left now. And it is completely insane. I keep thinking that I'm on like the last project that's that I'm gonna like finish using the leftovers on, and it just keeps going. It's really cracking me up. But I keep enjoying using it for various things because this color is so insanely beautiful. So I just keep turning to it, wanting it for something, and I keep having more. It's kind of magic, so not complaining about that. After Coco was born, the first thing that I knit for her was a tiny little baby Weasley sweater of my own design. So let's just take a moment for how freaking sweet this is. She was born November 30th, so she was due December 7th, so we thought she was even going to be a December baby, but she's definitely a Christmas time baby, and I knew that I wanted to make her a Weasley sweater. I'm hoping this will be able to be a tradition where I can make them for her every year for the foreseeable future. And I wanted to make up my own pattern just because I kind of knew exactly what I wanted. I definitely wanted to do Intarsia, and I wasn't seeing any baby sweaters that were exactly what I wanted. So I just kind of winged it with her body in front of me. The sleeves are probably a little too narrow. You know, there's different issues with it. It has this drop shoulder construction with an envelope neckline, which is probably not a great idea because what happens is the drop shoulder kind of goes off the shoulder, and so it really would have made more sense, I think, to do like a crew neck and open it up with a row of buttons in the back, like a couple buttons. If you don't know, newborns' heads are so huge, you can't just do like regular necklines for them, so you kind of have to do like an envelope, or there has to be some kind of button fastening to make like a crew neck get larger. So, you know, it's not a perfect design by any means. I made it up as I was going along, and when I was not sleeping a lot also, but I was really excited to do it. And, you know, I'm so glad that it worked out because I knit this in like the first couple weeks after giving birth, and right after that, postpartum depression hit me really, really hard. Which I'm not going to talk about in detail here because I don't have time, but I do have a post about it on my Instagram if you're curious and you want to look at that, especially if this is something that you've experienced before or if you are going to have a child and it's something that you're curious about. And also feel free to reach out to me with any questions that you may have about it, because I would love to have a dialogue with you about it. Just don't have time to go into it at this moment. So anyway, the postpartum depression hit me super hard right after that, and so I'm really glad that I was able to actually eke this out right before that did hit, because my knitting definitely slowed way down for obvious reasons with that. And I had not knit this before she was born because I wanted to have her in front of me to kind of, since I knew I was designing it myself, I kind of wanted to like knit it to her specifications as best I could do, although like I said, it's kind of ill-fitting. But anyway, thank goodness I knit this when I did, because I really had a short period of time after she was born to get this done before Christmas, and also before I kind of took a nosedive in terms of my ability to function. So that one really worked out for the better. I feel like I'm going so fast, so I hope this isn't like not relaxing to watch, because I usually kind of take it slow. So I should maybe slow down just a little bit, because I feel like I'm talking like a manic person. So I had knit a number of hats, well, just a few hats for Coco before she was born, but newborns have really tiny little heads, and she actually had a like 5 percentile or something like that head circumference. It was particularly small even compared to the average. She was a small baby compared to average. At birth, she's like in the 90th percentile now, but she was a week early. But still, she was like a little bit smaller than they would have expected her to be even at that age. Anyway, tangent. So a lot of her hats, right when she was first born, were just a little on the big side and falling off a lot and stuff. So I did whip up another smaller one. This is with a pattern. I think it's called the garter stitch something hat. It's by Pearl Soho, I think. And I had done one of these in advance in the worsted or Aran weight yarn that it called for. And so in order to make a smaller version, I just used a smaller yarn. So this is more of that leftover. It's Madeline Tosh Work Sock, which is labeled a sport and I think knits like a DK. But in any event, ended up being just a smaller version of that same hat that I had enjoyed knitting and that fit her well. She is with Daddy. It fit her well-ish. I mean, like, I think the best fitting baby hats are bonnets and they have actual ties, but when she was really tiny, I just felt weirdly uncomfortable about like having things like tied and stuff under her chin. I don't know, it just seemed strange to me. She ended up having kind of like a neck issue, so that she didn't have a lot of flexibility in her neck at birth. She's been doing physical therapy and she has most of her range of motion now, but maybe that had something to do with it in retrospect, with how she just kind of seemed like things were tight in there, and I don't know, it just felt strange to me. So I was enjoying more this style hat back then. Now that she's like sitting and looking around a lot and stuff, my favorite hat is one of the more bonnet styles that I made for her that ties under her chin, because it stays on and these fall off like crazy. But anyway, I knit this little thing for her. It fit her for like a couple weeks, but it was a joy to make, and it's a nice little keepsake. I'm going to have to just fill an entire box with all of the hand knits that I made for her as she grows out of them. I've already got tons of things that she's already grown out of. So I had actually started a project to be my like labor knitting, which I showed you previously. I'm actually still working on that. But that ended up not being what I wanted to work on in the hospital. And I actually didn't knit while I was in labor, but I did knit a little bit in the hospital in like the days after, though hardly at all actually. I thought that I would be doing more knitting as like a distraction, but I I think I needed something stronger to distract me, so I ended up doing a lot more of like walking around, watching Bake Off, and screaming my head off, and doing crossword puzzles things that were more distracting because I had a pretty painful labor. Where was I going with this? You know what? I'm just now thinking, like, I wonder how many of the women who talk about knitting when they're in labor are not doing natural childbirth, and so they do have a lot of like waiting around where they're not like in extreme pain. I hadn't really thought about that before, but I wonder. Okay, anyway, maybe that's why I didn't feel like knitting, because I was experiencing extreme pain. Where was I? So, what I did end up taking to the hospital and knitting on a little bit in the days after were the socks I was working on for Ryan. And when I finished those, I made a little baby pair to match for Coco. Ryan is wearing his, I think at this very moment, so. But his are the reverse colors. And I was going to make hers the same with the sort of pink heels and toes. But I actually had so little left over of the gray color that I could only make the heels and toes and cuffs out of it. So I had to make hers the reverse. But they look really cute matching. I have a photo of them together that I love. So those were a fun little thing. With the baby socks, I did discover that the pair that I had knit her that fits her the very best was actually a heel flap and gusset one, which is great because I had knit a ton of Fish Lips Kiss heel ones, so good job, Celeste. So I think I'm going to be doing that, making her socks going forward, but that's the only pair that I've made since she was born. And it actually has the Fish Lips Kiss heel as well, because this was before I even realized that the heel flap ones fit her so well. Yes, so after I finished those socks and the little socks, I wanted to cast on some more socks, and so I made these lovely things. These are the Kind of Magic socks by, I want to say it's We Are Knitters. It might be the other one. And these are cool. It's like a self-patterning ball, and it's sort of like the perfect thing. So it's like you start with the right amount to make a cuff, and then these, where these stripes come in, that sort of helps you figure out if you're at the right gauge, because each one of them should be an exact one round, so you can kind of adjust there should you need to make sure that the yarn is going to pool correctly for what is meant to be a kind of leopard spot printed appearance. Although most people who have seen them have not been able to identify that it's leopard spots. I've heard they look like clouds and various other things, but I think they look leopardy. And then the way the instructions tell you to do it is to do like a afterthought heel. But I decided to just do a Fish Lips Kiss heel because you actually get to this part of the ball and it changes to blue for the heels, and it tells you to like let that dangle because you're going to come back for the afterthought heel and then continue on. And I was like, well, that seems silly. Why don't I just use it to make a short row heel, and then I can cut it and then I can continue on, and then I don't have to let this like massive amount of yarn dangle here. It just seemed kind of weird to me that those are the instructions. But yeah, it works with any kind of short row here. You wouldn't be able to make a heel flap and gusset because you would screw up the pooling, obviously. But yeah, these were great to make because they basically, oh, and they go with my outfit now. They basically were like a simple sock, but they had enough of something going on to be not boring. And so they were kind of a perfect project in that moment that I was in where I was doing some knitting between, you know, like breastfeeding, which I was really struggling with, and yeah, I needed something that wasn't a struggle, but it also was sort of fun and a bit of a distraction and something to look forward to. So those were a fun project. The yarn itself is a superwash, but it has kind of a toothy quality to it, so it's interesting. I don't know why it is that way. And the other thing about this, I had like a really interesting experience, and I'm probably not even going to remember the details now. But I basically had a place where, like, oh, I know what it was. It had a knot in the yarn, so I had to cut that out, and cutting it out seemed to kind of screw up the pooling effect a little bit. So I needed to basically like patch that area by like making sure that the space where the knot was cut out, like I couldn't then just pull, you know, the amount I needed to weave in and start fresh, because then it screwed up where the spots were going to line up from there on, because it's like very exact, right? So I basically had this place where I needed to like patch things. It was like I needed the yarn to just touch perfectly here where that knot had been, but I couldn't do that because I needed to weave in these ends. So if I wove in those ends, then I had this length here where I needed to like patch it. And I couldn't patch it with like extra yarn because there's this exact amount and it's all measured out and everything. And so I thought about patching it with like some of the blue. Like I would just have like one little dash of blue there, and it would be a visible flaw, but at least the rest of the sock would still be patterned. But then what I realized I could do is I could just sort of patch it by like slipping those stitches from the previous row instead of knitting new ones, so that I just have essentially this one little section where instead of having stitches in that row, I've just slipped them from the previous row. And that allowed me to weave in those ends and have everything line up perfectly. I apologize if that is like way too hard to follow. It would actually be really cool to like show you how I did it if I had camera with me in the moment as I was doing it, and then it would probably make more sense if you're a visual learner. So apologies if that was all just confusing and you know, didn't make sense. But if it did make sense, you're probably like, ah, that's pretty cool, because I thought it was pretty cool. Another fun little thing I made for her was this little crown. See there. And I just made this with some Brooklyn tweed that I have in my stash. And this was a, I want to say like a Quince & Co pattern, but I basically just took the instructions. The pattern, like I said, with all these projects you can find on Ravelry if you want to know what the pattern is actually called and where it is, but it's knit on the bias in garter stitch. You can see the ridges kind of going like that. And I basically took like that concept and how it was shaped, but I did a totally different stitch count because there were sizes given for like child and adult, and I think maybe even something called baby that just wasn't as small as I wanted it to be. So I made it smaller, not just around, but in height. So I messed with the stitch counts and then just followed the instructions. And I think I also probably used like a totally different size yarn than the pattern had been written for. I don't remember, as I wanted to use this yarn to have it be like a little silver hat, because I made this essentially so that I could take this photo of her in like a little onesie that she has with a swan with a little silver crown on it, and her big stuffed swan that she has in her room, just to make like a little kind of Swan Lake like photo shoot moment. Yeah, so I wanted it to be this gray color. and it was super cute. And I definitely would make more of these, like when she's older, as something she can wear for, you know, dress up and make believe play. And it was very quick and simple to make and fun. I think it was from one of their like Christmas collections. Like it was inspired by the Christmas cracker crowns that people wear in the UK primarily, I think. Okay. The last thing I have finished, and then I will show you a couple whips, is this incredible beauty. I'm not even gonna like be modest about it. It's amazing and I love it. Here's the back. Look at these welts. Okay, so if you don't know, this is the Pengweeno, which is the baby and child version of the famous Stephen West Pengweeno, big slouchy, scrappy cardigan pattern. It is made for DK weight yarn, which I achieved by holding fingering weight double. And in some places, I did that to get a marled effect, like you can see here, where there's a lighter purple held with the darker purple. And in other places, like for example here, where you can see the kind of turquoise stripes on the more grayish background, I doubled up the same color yarn. So instead of getting a marled look, I got a more solid look. That's also how I did like this coral I-cord edging. And all of these welts here are done as solids as well in these stripes. And then in some places I did a marled fade, which is something I learned from Stephen West in the Marled Magic pattern, which I think is the most beautiful way to do a fade. I vastly prefer it to like striping the colors, because I think it gives you a more subtle effect, and I think the colors you choose don't actually have to be as close to each other to create a seamless fade that doesn't look stripy when you do it this way. So here up the back panel, I have faded from this turquoisey through the lime green into a lavender to a dark, and then back the other way. And here on the sleeves, I have faded from the lime green to the turquoisey green with marling. And so the way that you do that is you basically start like here. I started with 2 strands of the lime green color. It's Pesto is the name of it. These are both hedgehog fibers, Pesto and Fly. And all of these are scraps that I had in my stash, by the way. And actually, it probably, I used more colors than it probably looks like I used, because I did stay within this one sort of color story. So everything I pulled was like pinks and purples and greens and coral. But there actually are a lot more shades of like pink and purple in here than you would think. Like this color here is a koigu that only appears on these welts and nowhere else in the pattern. But there's other purples that you see other places in the pattern. So there's actually a ton of different yarns in here, but it has a somewhat unified kind of color story, I think. I think it's like right in that sweet spot for me and my taste of being like wild, but not totally random. Like the colors, I kept a limited palette, I guess you could say, even though I used a wide variety of actual colorways, I guess would be a way of putting it. And then I, you know, spaced them out in a way that wasn't totally random either. I put, you know, some more thought into like put the coral further away from the other coral. So like have it here and then here instead of getting it right next to each other. Anyway, I was going to talk about the fades. So the way that I did this sleeve is I started with 2 strands of the pesto marled together. I mean, not really marled, but just 2 strands held together. Then it changed to a marl where I had 1 strand of pesto and 1 strand of fly. And then I changed it out to 2 strands of fly. So essentially, here you've got completely fly, and here pesto, and in the center you've got them marled together. And that creates this really beautiful seamless fade. And that's the same thing that's going on here, but on like a bunch of different colors. So you start with fly and pesto, fade out the fly and replace, but keep the pesto. So you fade the fly into like this next color, keeping the pesto. Then when you keep the pesto, when you fade out, let me make it this way. Let me say it this way. First you have A and B. Then you swap A for C. So you have B and C. Then you swap out B for D. So now you have C and D. So every section has 1 strand of the section before and 1 strand of the next section. And by swapping only 1 at a time, you're able to create a fade. So, Stephen West, king of fades, in addition to being the king of everything else. This was such a joy. I made this in like about a week. I definitely found myself like finding more stolen moments to knit on when I was working on this than I had in the weeks before and after, because I was having so much fun with it. So that's why it got done pretty quickly. I would like, you know, find a way to get the baby entertained lying on the floor next to me, and I would make faces at her while I knit, you know, or things like that. So it was really, really, really fun. And I think probably even more fun than making a full size, because I was able to like get through it really quickly without like getting tired of it at all. And I didn't have to have a ton of any of the yarn. I could really just use scraps because it's so small. So it was great. Although it does almost make me wonder if I would like to make an adult one, just because the child size was so fun to make. Okay. Finally, let's talk about whips. First, let's look at the one you've already seen, which I had set up to be my labor knitting. I didn't end up wanting to knit on it when I was in the hospital, in part because I had it on these wooden needles, and this is just not good yarn for wooden needles. It's way too sticky. And so I was not loving how it felt to knit, and I ended up just giving in and putting it on the Chow Goose instead, and it's been more enjoyable to knit since then. So the yarn, I have to say, so this is Retrosaria yarn, and I do love, absolutely love Retrosaria, always. But I definitely prefer their Mondim or Mondim, which is like a 4-ply, which is what I used here. This is a single ply, has this label. And as you can see, it is very prone to these kind of like twisting around itself, curling up on itself moments. I don't know if maybe it's just the batch I have or what. It's almost like it's over twisted, which maybe is a common problem with single plies. I don't use a lot of single ply yarns, so I'm not sure. But I can see how this would be like a common thing with single plies, to sort of over twist it to make sure that it's strong enough, because it is only 1 ply. But the single ply I'm used to using when I have used it is this Hedgehog Fibers and Similar, which is a lot, I think it might be a superwash. So it's a lot softer and fluffier, and does not have that overly twisted appearance. So you can see the difference there. It doesn't twist in on itself or get tangled at all. It's very smooth. So possibly it's a difference in how tightly it's twisted, or how, you know, not tightly, but like the amount of twist in it. That's what I'm trying to say. Coupled with being non-superwash versus superwash, I think might be why this is different than single plies I've worked with in the past. But it's definitely not my favorite thing to work with. Although generally I'm not a huge single ply fan. Anyway, I purchased it when I was in Portugal because I absolutely love this beautiful, heathery, tweedy, sort of incredible color situation. I just absolutely loved this color. So I grabbed it with the undyed, thinking I would do some kind of color work, like a hat or something, and ended up deciding to do it as brioche in this Harlow hat by Andrew Mowry, which was maybe a couple inches when you last saw it. I did just start the decreases, I think, yesterday. And I've just been knitting on it here and there. I've really only had stolen moments to knit. It probably seems like I've gotten through a lot since you've seen me, but let me remind you that it's been like 4 or 5 months since I last recorded. And honestly, a fair amount of what I finished I did before she was born. So there you have it. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. As my mother always said. That must be from some movie or something, but I don't know what. Do you guys have those things where in your family there's like little phrases or jokes that people would make where in retrospect you're like, I bet they were quoting some movie, but like even they probably don't remember anymore what it was? Do you have those? Tell me what you have. Mine, I have so many. I have so many, and I have no idea where any of them come from. So anyway, I started the decreases yesterday, so it will probably be finished quite soon. I actually want to wear it primarily the reverse side out, but the way the decreases work, I like the reverse side of the decreases more. So that's why I'm knitting it this way. And I will show you the details of that and why that's my preference once I finish it, and you can actually see the decreases, so we can chat about that. But yeah, lovely little 2-color brioche. I talked about the 2-color tubular cast on in my previous episode. And I think it's going to fit pretty well. It's a little slouchy. Hopefully, I like how it looks on. If I don't, I will probably give it to someone, because that is what we do. And then the other thing I picked up and started working on the other day was a project for Coco, which is making her a couple of bibs. I have this one, and the name of this pattern is, I don't remember, but it's on, like I said, they're all on Ravelry. So these pretty little garter stitch, rounded, cute little simple bibs. I think it's like a Danish pattern or something. It has a buttonhole there. I need to sew the button on. And then I've started a second one. So this is like the DK weight, basically, with that unending ball of Madeline Tosh, which is still this big. It has been this big since before I knit these. And then I knit this hat. And then I knit this bib. And I still have this yarn. Truly something mystical is going on. But anyway, so I need to do the knot, or the button on this, then I need to block this guy, but it's a that's a DK weight, and so for this one I'm doing fingering weight double, which essentially will work out to be like the same size. So I'm going to have both of these. I think they'll look kind of cute together. Not like she'll be wearing them together, but, you know, just as like a cute little set. And, yeah, they're basically bibs for, like, catching all the excess drool when she starts teething, is what I'm thinking. For eating, it's going to be, like, such a messy situation that I'll probably want to have one of those, like, rubber bibs that actually catches the food and stuff. But these I think will be good to just put on her while she's toddling around to like soak up some of that excess drool. And I actually think a cotton would probably be a really good material for this as well because it's so absorbent. But I don't really have any cotton in my stash. So I used super washable because obviously for something like this I'm going to be washing it all the time, and it just does not make a ton of sense to do it with the non-superwash. When I have some superwash in my stash, I could use this, you know, leftovers. So that's what I'm doing. But I have actually just ordered some cotton for making some washcloths for her. I just ordered some like Dishy from Knit Picks. Actually, I don't think it was Dishy. I think it was like a cotton rayon blend, because I think I ordered like a fingering weight actually. But anyway, that some leftovers of that could possibly become some more bibs if I decide that she needs more than two. So that's on the horizon, perhaps. Yeah, and that's everything I've been working on. I do have my long neglected beautiful daydreamer still sitting here. I'm honestly a little bit intimidated to jump back into it. I haven't touched it since before I gave birth, and I love it. It is a somewhat complicated pattern. It just takes a little bit of thought, and so it hasn't been the thing that I've been wanting to work on in like short little stolen moments. And also I kind of lost my motivation because given that I was having such a small amount of time to knit, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to finish it in time to wear it this cold season. I knew it wasn't going to get finished before it would be warm outside. So that kind of decreased my motivation a little bit, thinking, well, maybe I'll have more time to knit it like later, and then I'll knit it for the next year, the next cold season. But now I want to pick it up again, but I'm like a little bit nervous that it's been so long since I've knit on it. I know it's going to take me like a second to get my head back in, like into the texture. It won't take that long, but I just feel like I need a moment set aside where like she is actually asleep, you know, or I've asked Ryan to watch her like I did just now so that I could record this. Like, I need more than a moment where I think I have some time to myself, but at any moment I could get interrupted. So yeah, it's TBD on when I will get back into that, but hopefully sometime soon. And I'm not letting myself start any other garments until, well, so far I haven't let myself start any other garments until I finish it. That's sort of the rule. But I'm thinking that the new rule might be I can't start any other sweaters, but I might let myself, if I feel like I need to do some summer garments, and since it is spring now, I might be okay with that like kind of exception. But I do need to jump back into it and get it ready for fall at some point. It is about half done, and it does take a lot of man hours to get through it. I've talked about it in the past, but I think I was somewhere around like doing like one round per half hour, I think, and I calculated it all out to where it was like even knitting a substantial amount on it, it was definitely going to take me several months, I think like 4 or 5 months, when I kind of did the math of the rate I was going at. And so that's when I was knitting at the rate that I could knit. as a pregnant person versus a mother of an infant. Obviously, my productivity has gone down a bit, so who knows? Who knows when it will ever be done? But it is certainly a lovely project that is deserving of my attention. So I need to get back. Into that. And you know, sometime when I'm allowed to knit more garments again, I'm going to do a little cardigan as well with this lovely yarn that I just got sent to me as a gift from my dear friend Ellie, who is probably watching. Hi, I love you. Ellie, also known as Skenanigans. And she sent it to me because the colorway is called Fiona, which, if you don't know, is the name of the beautiful hippo princess who lives here in Cincinnati and is my icon, and Ellie's as well. Ellie is from here also, though she lives far away now. And I guess that's all that I have to share with you guys at the moment. Thank you for tuning in. Like I said, I hope you are well in these trying times. I hope that if you do find yourself with spare time or, you know, anxiety, that your knitting is keeping you company. And I hope to see you again soon. Definitely won't be another 4-month hiatus, or at least fingers crossed there won't be. And yeah, like I said, thanks again for tuning in. You can definitely follow along on Instagram if you want to see what I'm up to more regularly, and for lots of cute baby stuff, because it's basically all it is just her face all the time. And yeah, see you later. Bye.